Welcome to the Black Health Lit podcast, where we focus on all things Black health. This is a space where we can be Black, proud, and healthy. Today's episode is focused on nutrition and diabetes. I hope you enjoy listening and you learn some new information here. If you're new here, make sure you like and subscribe. Enjoy. Progress. Welcome back to Black Health Lit. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Lewis Bertus, and we are talking about nutrition and diabetes. So before we jump in, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to my audience?
Yes, my name is Lewis Bertus. I'm a physician assistant practicing in family medicine, specializing in diabetes.
All right. And where are you located with a beautiful background?
Yes, this is North Carolina. It's a beautiful day out here. Yeah. So
And no haze.
no haze, no orange sky. It's blue skies as normal.
And clouds, sunshine and clouds. Very nice. We take those things for granted.
We do.
So Lewis, tell me, how did you get into healthcare?
So great question to start because when I tell people what I started out studying, they're like, why, how does that connect? So I started out with a bachelor's in theology. I wanted to actually go into pastoral route, pastoring. I grew up very religious and, still am a strong believer in a Christian faith. So, but I had to ask myself, where would I do the most good in the world? And when I think about, my Jesus, he was known as a great physician. He ran around healing people of their physical ailments. For restoring them spiritually. So it was a no-brainer. I wanted to be a physician as well. I wanted to go into healthcare. I felt like I would do the most good, as a Christian in health, teaching, pointing people to the way of health, as well as spiritual restoration.
Absolutely. I love that that's your inspiration, and that's a great point. Jesus was a healer, and that's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that's what inspired them to get into healthcare. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to make a difference. I like to help people." But that's great to hear a different inspiration from someone.
Yeah, it is different.
Yeah, it is. It's great though. So you are leading an initiative called Diabetes 180.
Yeah.
What inspired Diabetes 180?
So I definitely have to say my wife. I again, like, kind of goes in line with my whole inspiration of doing the most good, and as a physician, in healthcare, working for years, I was seeing a big need for lifestyle intervention because medicines can only go so far, and all these chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, high cholesterol, kidney failure, all these are lifestyle diseases. And my wife actually had diabetes for 8 years. She followed the doctor's recommendations, whether it be, low carb dieting, being adherent and compliant with medication use. And for 8 years, her diabetes just kept getting worse and worse. It didn't really get better. And it's interesting because I had a good perspective as a physician treating diabetics. You ask any physician and who is their most stubborn patients, it's the diabetics. They don't listen to you. You tell them to stop eating, all that sugar and snacks, and soda, and they clearly they're not listening because their A1C is going up, their blood sugars are all over the place, right? They're just stubborn and not listening to you. But my wife told a different story because my wife, I was watching what she ate. She ate the low carb diet. She took her medicines, at least the ones that didn't cause her side effects, because that's often a problem. You got to find a medicine that works. And her numbers really weren't getting better. So I realized maybe it's not because my patients are lying. Maybe it's because medicine is not enough. And maybe this whole carbohydrate centered idea is not really a cure or a way to reverse this condition. So it led me to, really helping my wife. I researched for over a year the science behind diabetes, type 2 diabetes specifically. Simply, we have too much fat in our diet. And so it was amazing because you got me now, right?
I got you.
Yeah, it's amazing because in 6 weeks, fast forwarding, 6 weeks of putting my wife on a low fat, carb rich diet, she was off her medications.
Wow. 6 weeks.
6 weeks. after 8 years of diabetes. And then I researched this more, and this is a common thing. People who are starting a low fat, whole food, plant-based, not processed carbs, but wholesome carbs,
Yeah.
and with limited amount of fat in the diet, not no fat, but low fat,
Yeah.
they were coming off their medicines, they were reversing diabetes in weeks and months,
Wow.
what medicine couldn't do in years. So of course I took that and run with it, and I said I started this company, Diabetes 180, to teach
Yeah.
people, coach them, and give them support and the education where that medicine fails, and unfortunately our physicians are failing at.
Yeah. So you said a couple of things there. First off, let's give a very simple definition of what diabetes is.
Yep.
I think we know as Black people that it has something to do with sugar and that
Yeah.
you're not supposed to eat candy and drink soda.
Yes.
That's what we know about diabetes.
That is part of the problem. So people even I know a lot of people, they call it the sugar diabetes, or
Yep.
I got the sugars,
Yep.
it's not even diabetes. I got the sugar, my
Yep.
doctor told me I got the sugar.
Yep. That's what we call it.
But it's kind of deceiving when you define diabetes as a sugar problem. So if I were to describe it or define diabetes in simpler terms and more accurate terms,
Yeah.
type 2 diabetes is your body becoming resistant to insulin,
Okay.
causing you to be intolerant or sensitive to sugar or
Okay.
glucose, right?
Yeah.
Um, and type 1 diabetics is different. It's your body is no longer producing any insulin, and that's why you're intolerant or you're sensitive to sugar.
Okay.
Problem is not the sugar, it's the insulin sensitivity.
Okay. That's a great definition, very simple and easy to
Yep.
understand.
Yep.
So that clarifies that it's not just, oh, I got the sugars, don't
I
eat.
got sugars, yeah. So because once you understand the cause, then you can start to treat the disease.
Right,
As
get to the
long as
root.
you keep on blaming the sugar, all you're doing is looking at the symptom, which it makes sense because as a physician in medical school, we're
Yeah.
taught to treat symptoms,
Yeah.
That's what
Yep.
medicines do. We treat the symptoms. We don't really work to reverse the disease, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and of course that's how medicine sells. But with diabetes, when we focus on the sugar, you're just dealing with a symptom. But
Yeah.
when you focus on insulin resistance and reversing insulin resistance, restoring your body's sensitivity to insulin, its own insulin in the place of type 2 diabetes, what you're
Yeah.
doing is reversing the cause of the disease.
Yeah.
That's why people have results.
So talk a little bit about diabetes reversal. What's the science behind that?
Okay, so so just once you understand the definition of what it is, it's easy to understand the science, because and this is nothing new. When you
Yeah.
look at research, this is something from over 100 years. There's been studies and experiments that show that our bodies, when we have too much fat in our bodies,
Yeah.
and specifically in tissues not designed to store fat, it leads
Yeah.
us to be resistant to insulin.
Right.
So I guess a good way to explain it is that your body can use it wants to use sugar for energy, right? Or more specifically glucose. That's what we use for energy. But when we have a lot of fat in our body, what happens is the body now transition to using fat for energy, or prioritizing the fat that's already in your cells.
Yeah.
And it tells insulin's job, and I guess this is where it kind of gets a little more detailed. Insulin's job is to determine what to use for energy, right? And to take that sugar that's in your blood, right, and put it inside the cell, right?
Yeah.
But if the cell is already stuffed with fat, what happens now is that the sugar is left trapped in the blood. Insulin is like the body saying, insulin, we don't need you to bring more sugar up in here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Get
We're
out.
dealing with this excess storage of fat.
Yeah.
So chill out on the blood. We'll let you know when we need you. Come back later, right? And this process happens over years and years, right? As the body becomes resistant to insulin, the pancreas starts to push out more insulin. And so that's one method of knowing whether you have insulin resistance. Ask your doctor to check your insulin levels.
Okay.
Because your doctor is just checking your A1C, they're checking your blood sugar. but they're not checking your insulin level. Your A1C, your blood sugar might be normal, but
Yeah.
your insulin is high as heck, because
Yeah.
your body's working extra hard to drive the sugar into the cell, right? And
Yeah.
until after and this process could take 8 to 10 years, eventually your pancreas gives up, the machine starts to break down, and
Yeah.
now it can't keep up. And now what happens is the sugar stays trapped in your blood, and now you're diabetic. But it's been happening for 10 years.
Wow. Huh. I've never heard diabetes broken down that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
And you know what's crazy?
It's taking up all the space.
It's sad that most people haven't heard it, even in healthcare fields.
Oh, yeah.
I've been presenting this information, and it's nothing new. I mean, I didn't make this up. This is something that's well known. It's been repeated in fat and high sugar.
Yeah.
They had 3 groups, right? One group eating a whole bunch, and they're not diabetic, okay? But one group ate nothing but protein for, I can't remember how long it was. Let's say 3 or 4 days. Another group ate nothing but high fat for a few days. Another group ate nothing but sugar. I'm talking about white bread, white sugar, all the things, candy, drink, juice, things that diabetics are not supposed to drink, right?
Yeah.
And they weren't diabetic.
Yeah.
Okay. After I can't remember the time frame, but after going through that time frame of eating a high protein, high fat, or high sugar diet, guess which group had the worst tolerance for sugar?
I'm going to, based off what you. Yes, I would say the people that ate the sugar or candy, but
right.
That's what you just educated me on. I know it wasn't that group now.
It wasn't that. So surprise, surprise. After testing, it's called a glucose challenge test, testing to see body is intolerant, right?
Yeah.
Or the sugar load, and the group was high fat group. The group that had more consistently had worse tolerance for sugar following a high sugar diet. Their sugar stayed normal.
Wow. So to put an analogy on what you said, rewind back to the fat and the sugar in the cells, it's sort of like, you're in your 20s, or I don't know, some people club later. You go to the club, they're like, we're at capacity, right? You cannot get in here. And so people start loitering outside, and that's when the problems and the parking lot pimping and shootings and pop off. So it's sort of like that, right?
That's a wonderful analogy. I would never thought of that. That's good.
Okay, so you already shared a testimonial and a success story with your wife. Do you have any other testimonials or success stories that you'd like to share?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I think testimonies also will answer the question of how can one, where do we start?
Yeah.
How I teach people is to eliminate fat in their diet is by eating a more first trying to learn to cook without oil. That's one of the first easy things.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. It's
That's
tough.
so hard. Even
it's tough to think about, but yes, even oil, because it's the most fatty substance there is. Think about it. Is there anything fattier than oil is? And what I've learned with my wife is that it's very easy. So I ask people, I challenge them to try to start maybe make a few meals with using vegetable broth or a little water to saute or basically steam your food. You prize, people do this. Okay, it actually tastes good without the oil, right? So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is to start limiting animal products in your diet.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's your dairy, eggs, cheese, fish, right? And this is for those who are looking to really experience a 180. Now, if you want to stay on medicine, you're okay with dealing with the complications of diabetes, because there are so many, and it eventually will kill you. Like people who have diabetes, it's not a question of if you're gonna have a heart attack. It's a question of when. Because that's sure, absolutely.
Earlier in the show, you mentioned whole and wholesome carbohydrates, not processed. So if I go to the store and I get a box of crackers or some cookies, the stuff that's usually in the middle of the grocery store that has a shelf life of 3 years, those are carbs too, right?
Yes,
so what are wholesome Salt.
So
Not Oreos, right?
yeah, not Oreos. What I like to say it if it's been adulterated or I say made by man, right? Then it's well, if it's in a box, for
Yeah.
example, right?
Yeah.
Then that's most likely been processed, right? You know,
Yeah.
even though even those products that are supposed to be healthy, right? There's a lot of healthy snack foods, healthy food products that are touted as, you know, low carb or low fat or whatever. But
Yeah.
if you really want to eat wholesome foods, you got to eat foods that come from nature, right?
Yeah.
Eating like you said is a good example. If you're in a grocery store, staying in the outside, right, the produce section, right,
Yes.
and limiting your time in the middle of the store, right,
Yes.
it's definitely a different approach. I mean, it's like a 180
Yeah.
what we are used to eating, right?
Yes.
And for some, eating this way can be overwhelming, but I challenge everybody. That's why I challenge everybody, at least start with one meal a day like that, you know.
Yeah.
Don't try to change your whole day, it'll be overwhelming, but just try one meal a day where you're eating produce, whether it be legumes and whole grains,
Yeah.
um, of course, vegetables and fruits. You know,
Yeah.
there's a whole classification of foods. There's a whole a lot of people, you know, they think, oh man, I can't eat anything. But
Yeah.
when you go to a grocery store and you go to the produce section, you know, does that look like nothing? You
Right.
know,
Right.
it's a
You
lot of
can't
food
eat
up in
junk.
there. You know? What you
Yeah.
really need is that you can't eat junk, and that's what it really comes down to. We're afraid to get rid of the junk.
Yeah.
You know, you are not limited. There's an unlimited amount of food that falls under the category of wholesome.
Yeah.
It's just we gotta challenge ourselves to eat that way, you know.
Yeah.
And for some, it's just gonna start with that one meal at a time, you know.
Yeah. And that can be an adjustment. Like our palates have been trained and conditioned to the American diet, which is heavily based in fat, salt, and sugar. You
Absolutely.
know, so and I don't know if this is true, but I feel like salt and sugar are addictive.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I love potato chips.
Oh,
Okay.
that's my weakness too.
Oh, put a
You,
potato
you like it salty.
put a
Yeah.
big bag of potato chips in front of me, family size, and I will
Yeah.
eat the whole bag. And
That's
don't let there be some French onion dip in the mix, okay?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't buy chips for that reason because it's like once you pop, you can't stop. That's me with potato chips. And every blue moon, maybe a few times a year, because I'm not perfect, I get a hold of some, or the chips get a hold of me. And
Yeah.
I noticed that after I have a potato chip binge, I start craving
Mhm.
salty stuff. And I'm like, I want
It's
some
like
more potato chips. You know what
a
I mean?
drug addict, man.
Yeah. And then I'm like, just a
Yeah.
small bag of potato chips, from the dollar store.
It
Um,
is.
but so I say all that to say our palates, they can be changed, they can adapt, they can adjust. And when I first started transitioning away from potato chips and more processed foods, like I don't buy bread, I'll eat it at a restaurant, but I don't buy it because there's no perfect way to eat. But if somebody is looking to transition to more wholesome foods, for example, eating more whole fruits, vegetables, celery, like from the produce, the stuff that's going to expire if you don't
Yeah.
eat. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? The stuff that's like, if you don't eat this, it's going to wilt and turn brown and be expired. That's what we should be eating.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
So if you're used to eating fruity candy, for example, or fruit cocktail, because I've met people who think fruit cocktail is healthy, how can somebody start to transition when our palate is so used to sugar and salt? And it's hard to just jump in and
Yeah.
start eating celery when you've been eating Twizzlers and potato chips.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's a good way to make that transition and not be like, ugh, this has no flavor?
They were in it. Yeah. So that's what I've been saying. Like you have to start with a plan, right? There's a saying that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It's not going
Yep.
to happen by accident. You're not going to just be like, yeah, I think I'm going to start eating healthy now. And good intentions, man, get you nowhere.
Yes, yes.
As a coach, I teach what they call implementation intentions. So
Okay.
we have to have a plan, for almost to the point where every especially food struggles or food
Yeah.
habits have a counter plan. So for example, if like you said it, you have a good example. Like if I'm struggling with potato chips, right? That's my weakness, right? If I'm invited to well, I should say the first step is I'm no longer going to buy potato chips to bring home, right?
Yes.
That's a plan that that's actually is a good implemented intention. You decided conscientiously, I will no longer buy potato chips. Now, if I'm invited to a party, right, and there's potato chips on the table, I usually, start with one, and then it turns into two, turns into
yes,
right?
the whole bowl.
My whole bowl. My next plan might be I'm only going to limit myself to just let's say a handful of chips when I'm at a party. I'll allow myself one handful. So this way you're actually thinking about it. It's not because usually what happens is it's a subconscious drive that leads us to eat, and we bypass our frontal lobe. We're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
Having a plan, you're putting your frontal lobe in the driver's seat. Now you're in control.
Yeah.
Right? It's controlled chaos in a sense, right? So you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan for every situation, every scenario that you struggle with. Right?
Okay.
So give yourself a plan. And then of course, over time, as you see that you're gaining control over that struggle, it gives you more confidence, right, to get towards your ultimate goals.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. And write it down.
Write it down. Otherwise, it's just an intention, right?
Tell somebody. It could be on a sticky note.
Yeah.
It can be in one of those cute little journals off Amazon.
Yes. Yeah. So those who write it down, studies show those who write down and have a written plan are more likely to succeed at their health goals. Right?
Yeah.
And especially when that plan is specific, not like I'm going to start drinking more water.
Yeah.
How much water are you going to start drinking?
Yes.
How often are you going to start drinking that water? What time of day are you going to drink that water? Right?
Ooh, when you actually,
people who do that are going to be more likely to succeed in their commitment.
That makes sense. Write it down.
So in other words, write it down and be specific. How are you going to approach this plan? Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. You have educated me. So I hope that people listen to this and watch this and feel educated as well. You ready for some rapid fire questions?
For sure. And then one thing too, I know you asked previously about a testimony. I want to share my prison testimony. I got a lot of stories of people who reversed their diabetes with this plan.
Absolutely. Please share.
But my recent one that I'm really, really proud about is a guy who's in a corrections system, and they're giving nothing but processed junk, right? But when I told him about the importance of limiting animal products in his diet, and the good thing is he was just really recently diagnosed with diabetes. I mean, like literally a few months ago, right? His blood sugars was like 500, crazy. He was feeling sick and everything.
Oh my God.
A1C was 15.5.
Woo, he's lucky to be alive.
Right? You're not gonna believe this. You're gonna tell me I'm a liar. So after I talked to him, he went on a vegan diet. So in prison, you can ask for a vegan diet. Unfortunately, the only way to do it is it has to be religious. It can't be for health reasons. Isn't that crazy? So they're not going to give you a vegan diet for health reasons. It has to be. So he said, well, I think he's a practicing Muslim. So he said, you know what? He went to the chaplain. He got transitioned to a vegan diet. Okay, 3 months. His A1C went from 15.5 to 5.9.
Woo! That's almost a third of what it was.
It's crazy, right?
That's insane.
Insane, right? And of course, he still has a lot of processed food in his diet, but he got rid of the animal products.
Yeah.
Right? He severely limited them. I'm not saying, I'm not sure if it was 100%, but he limited them, and that's what we need to do. We have to be willing to get rid of the animal products. Yeah. Anything from this podcast, we got to eat more whole food, plant-based, vegan diet.
Absolutely. And that's a hard transition because the American diet is
rich, process rich.
Very much so. Growing up, we saw commercials, got milk. It was like milk was almost branded so good. It was like Nike, like just do it. It was just got milk. Like, yeah, I want some milk too.
Yeah, right.
The Oreo commercials, like you gotta have some milk, And I can't remember the ones for cows. There was a commercial though for a few years that like encouraged us to eat more beef.
Yeah.
I can't remember which commercial it was, but anyway, that is a hard thing to do, but I think that people can do it. Yeah. It just, a little bit at a time, small.
A little bit at a time.
Yeah, write it down like you said.
Mhm.
Maybe share the goal with someone so they can hold you accountable. So it's, you know what I mean? That seems to
That's a
help
good
a lot
next
of
step.
people too. For
Accountability and ultimately have making sure you know you have a reason for what you're doing. If you don't
yeah,
have a if you don't have a strong why, then you're not going to take anyhow, right?
yeah, yeah,
You have to have a strong reason, and that's why I encourage people to do vision boards or write
yeah,
down what they really want to accomplish in life, and
yeah,
that will feed their the fire when
yeah,
especially starts to stoke and get low. Think
yeah.
about reason, right?
Yep. Good advice. Good advice. Thank you for that. Thank you for educating me.
Yep.
Thank you for what you're doing. I hope that more people take your approach and learn about your program, especially people who already have diabetes,
Yep.
because it's an epidemic in America, but it is especially an epidemic and something that's hammering the Black community, always has
Yes.
hammered the Black community. It's almost like a given. You know, we take it like, oh, well, it's not if you're going to get diabetes, it's when in the Black community a lot of times. And I hope
Expect.
that, yeah, we move away from that as a norm and it can become the exception. Like, you know, generationally, we can say, oh, yeah, we used to have diabetes in our family, but our family don't get it like that no more.
I love what the mayor of New York he said it's not your DNA, it's your dinner.
Woo!
Write that down, right?
I like that one. I like that one. And that is so true. Um,
Yeah.
it's unfortunately it's also something to touch on when it comes to your dinner. You know, I won't start a whole new podcast here, but for people who live in food deserts where there's not a lot of grocery stores and all you have access to is, you know, dollar stores and corner markets, sometimes farmers markets are a great option. And then
Yeah.
also, I know some churches and community organizations are stepping up, especially in the Ohio space, Dayton, Columbus, Cleveland, Akron area, Toledo are stepping up and having food drives where
Oh,
they give away fresh produce. My mother just volunteered for one yesterday. So, but we may have to get creative to find fresh produce, but it's out there. And sometimes it's
yeah.
free because somebody got
Yeah.
some grant money.
That's
Somebody got
true.
some grant money, okay? Okay. So let's go back. Let's see. You ready for your rapid fire questions, or is there
Sure.
anything else you want to share?
I think I shared all, man. I could talk forever, so you better cut me out. Cut
All
me off.
right. All right. All right. I'm not going to cut you off, but let's get into these. So these are quick and then these are off the cuff. What does wellness mean to you?
Wellness. Good question. Wellness to me is restoration of mind, body, and spirit. Because
Ooh.
you know, we are
Okay.
we are we are deep. We're interconnected beings, and we need to wholeness not in just the physical, but also in the spiritual and in the mind.
Absolutely. I like that one. That restoration piece is huge. What does
Yes.
Black health literacy mean to you?
So I think we all know at this stage, and that Black communities, like many other minority groups, are disproportionately affected due
Yeah.
to lack of access to good health, quality health care. You
Yes.
know, so the good thing is though that knowing what the information that I teach, 90 to 95% of our chronic diseases can be prevented and treated in your kitchen.
Yeah. Yes.
When we arm ourselves with this knowledge, it doesn't really matter what your access to healthcare is.
Yeah.
You become the physician. You
Yeah.
become your own doctor.
Yeah.
And it starts with arming yourself with your knowledge that food is medicine.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. That literacy, when you know better, you do better. And then
Yes.
finally, how can people connect with you, learn more about Diabetes 180 and all of the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. You could find me on my Facebook group. Just go on Facebook, search for Facebook group Diabetes 180.
Okay.
Um, that's where I do a lot of interaction. I try to teach, and I try to develop a community where we work with each other and hold each other accountable.
Okay.
In the journey. So I definitely would say look for me on Facebook, Diabetes 180, or under my name, Lewis Bertus, on Facebook groups.
Okay.
Uh, and and then I would say you could also follow me on YouTube. You could find me on YouTube under the same name, Diabetes 180.
Okay.
Uh, and my website, lewisbertus.com.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the information again. And it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure. It's been a pleasure. One thing I'll say before we close, if anyone that wants access to some free recipes, I've compiled over 250 recipes that you
Whoa.
can send. So I guess we could have them a link in the show notes or something.
Yeah.
You can get access to those recipes for free.
Absolutely. I will definitely share that out as well as your Facebook group once this episode is posted.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right.